I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. All right, listen, we had two major banks collapse over the weekend. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it. I'm going to bring up, unfortunately, from MSNBC, one of its reporters who also interviewed, Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, who is pretty proficient on economic issues. I think she taught at Harvard. Taught economics or something of this she taught at Harvard. So I'm going to bring up in a few moments. Unfortunately, I got to bring up one of MSNBC's reporters. I'm not going to call the name, so you'll just have to suffer it through when it happens. But I do want to say that this is the tip of the iceberg of bank collapse. And bank collapsing is tantamount to the beginning of a depression, not just a recession, but a depression. So economically, I'm going to be talking about understanding the economic crisis. If I don't get to it today, I'll try to do a more detailed report on what's happening economically in America so you can learn how to protect yourself. But this, the Signature Bank, I think in California, and Silicon Valley Bank, and then another bank named Swiftgate, three banks actually collapsed. And more on the chopping block. I'm going to let you listen to it. Unfortunately, you got to put up one MSNBC people, but this is where I got this from, so I'm going to let you take a look at this. I'll be right back. Take a look.
She says, quote, "No one should be mistaken about what unfolded over the past few days in the U.S. banking system. These recent bank failures are the direct result of leaders in Washington weakening the financial rules. In the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, Congress passed the Dodd-Frank Act to protect consumers and ensure that big banks could never again take down the economy and destroy millions of lives. Wall Street chief executives and their armies of lawyers and lobbyists hated this law. They spent millions trying to defeat it, and when they lost, they spent millions more trying to weaken it. Greg Becker, the chief executive of Silicon Valley Bank, was one of the many high-powered executives who lobbied Congress to weaken the law. In 2018, the big banks won. With support from both parties, President Donald Trump signed a law to roll back critical parts of Dodd-Frank. Banks like Silicon Valley Bank, which had become the 16th largest bank in the country before regulators shut it down on Friday, they got relief from stringent requirements, basing their claim on the laughable assertion that banks like them weren't actually big. Therefore, they didn't need strong oversight. She says, quote, "I fought against these changes. I wish I had been wrong. But on Friday, Silicon Valley Bank executives were busy paying out congratulatory bonuses hours before the FDIC rushed in to take over their failing institution, leaving countless businesses and nonprofits with accounts at that bank alarmed that they wouldn't be able to pay their bills and employees. Had Congress and the Federal Reserve not rolled back the stricter oversight, SVB would have been subjected to stronger requirements to withstand financial shocks. They would have been required to conduct regular stress tests to expose their vulnerabilities and shore up their businesses. But because those requirements were repealed, when an old-fashioned bank run hit them, they couldn't withstand the pressure. These threats never should have been allowed to materialize."
All right, unfortunately, that was the voice of Rachel Maddow from MSNBC. You'll live through it. I know probably because some of you have conniptions and all kinds of, anyway. But the thing of it is that these banks, and as you know, we're going after the Mellon Bank. Banking is probably the most banking, and anytime you're dealing with money, Wall Street, investments, banking. Here's what happens. You own a bank, right? You have a bank. So you start a bank. People say, okay, well, come you got a bank here. All right, let's make our deposit. Put your paycheck in there, do all kind of other things. If you don't run a business, you run your payroll through that bank. So the banks take a lot of money from the community. One of the things that if you ever come to Harlem, and people that are close to, that live in the New York City area, in Harlem in particular, and members of the ATLAH Church in general, if you go on 125th Street, you'll see every other block, there's a Chase Manhattan Bank. I mean, they dominate. You got on Wells Fargo, they got a Wells Fargo branch on 124th Street and a Wells Fargo branch on 117th Street. They say, well, why would you have so many branches of one bank? Well, first of all, because there's a lot of money in the community. And banks don't go out and manufacture automobiles or motorcycles or something and then They get their money by you coming in and really giving it to them. You say, here's my money. And they say, okay, we'll give you an account number, right? We'll play like you playing the numbers or something. And say, now my money will be saved. The federal government back in decided they're going to insure deposits up to $250,000 because banks are just a group of people who decided they want to start a bank. You're crazy enough to go give them your money. You say, it's a bank? Yeah, it's a bank, but it ain't Mother Teresa. It's people, men who are looking to make a profit. Take your money. And then when they take your money, the Dodd-Frank and the Glass-Steagall, if you will, reforms and legislation from years ago said that, okay, banks take people's money, but they can't just do anything they want to, such as invest their money. And I think the Signature Bank was investing in this crazy crap game called cryptocurrency. You fool around with that. I mean, I've heard a lot of people, and that boy Eric Adams say pay him in cryptocurrency. And that's why Signature Bank failed Friday as well, this past weekend. But the banks need to have regulations. If we people bring $1 million a week to a bank, and they're sitting on that money, say, wow, why would we just sit here wait for them to come back and ask for it again? Let's invest it. And you can invest it in high, because it is not the bank's money, it's your money. And let's say invest it in a high roller type of a thing where you're not so sure that it's going to pay, or they buy some stocks and buy some stocks in an upstart company, and the company fails, and so they lose $1 million. Well, they don't tell you they lost it. But the way the Dodd-Frank, if you will, which happened after the 2008 bank, the fiasco and the debacle back in 2008 when all those banks collapsed. AIG Insurance Company collapsed, Lehman Brothers collapsed, Goldman Sachs collapsed. The government stepped in and paid all the bills, said, we'll give you all the money back. They paid all the bills. Joe Biden, my time, says he's not going to do that now. We're not going to pay all the bills. The banks are going to have to root little pig or die. That's not true either. But at any rate, I think what I want to say to you is that you need to understand banking this way. Every time you go to a bank, it's any bank, it's Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, Barclays Bank, or whoever it is, any kind of bank. It's just a group of people who got together and decided they want to start a business rather than making donuts. They will say, we'll take your money and hold it for you. Rather than you putting it under the mattress, bring us your money. We'll give you an account number, right? And then if you write a check and it bounced, they'll charge you interest, even though you got the money in their bank, right? And then they charge you interest and fees. It's your money. But they say, well, for us to manage your money, you got to pay us $35 a month interest and $75 a month fees. But it's your money. And then what they do with your money is they take your money and they make a loan. Guy want to start a motorcycle shop. Well, we'll give you $250,000 of other people's money because it ain't their money. So the bank gave us a loan. That no bank gave you nothing. That money belonged to all the people in the neighborhood. They just gave it to the guy who wanted to make the money. And then they don't give you none of the profit. They give them a loan, they charge them 18% interest, or what do they charge them? Maybe 5% interest. And they get the money, they get the loan coming back, then they start loaning money to buy houses, to buy businesses, start up, buy dresses. Then they get fancy and they issue a credit card. So here, take our credit card. Well, you got to count with us, our bank. Take our credit card. Go ahead, go with $1,000 credit limit. Go just spend yourself crazy. Then they charge you 24% interest on your money. The banks do. So, here's the deal. The deal is this, is that. So Glass-Steagall from many years ago had some control over this, saying that banks could not do all of that. And if they did, they had to share the profits with the actual people who did own the money. But then the 2008 debacle took place, and they came back, and I think when was it, with the Dodd-Frank, if you will, banking regulations, which also put a curtail. But I'm sorry, the Dodd-Frank was in place before 2008. Then 2008 bank failures, and Trump comes along in 2018, and gets rid of all those laws that said banks cannot invest money for certain places. that bank employees, chairman of banks and CEOs can't pay themselves these exorbitant bonuses. Banks can't buy private jets. So the Dodd-Frank gave some regulations of what banks could do. Trump came along and said, get rid of all that, let the bankers do what they want to do. So now Signature Bank, dealing in cryptocurrency, and Silicon Valley Bank, which had made a lot of investments that were just didn't pan out. And so when the executives saw that the bank was getting ready to go under and the Fed was getting ready to step in, they wrote themselves some real big fat checks of your money. So having said that, I want to take on the Mellon Bank. The thing about this is that once you get a crack in somebody's armor, even though Mellon Bank got $52 trillion of other people's money, and they call themselves a bank, you can't even, they don't, people like you can't make no deposit at the Mellon Bank. You ain't got enough money. Warren Buffett got $95 billion in the Trillion Bank. So they only handle really high-end people, right? You got to have $1 billion or so to open up an account at the Mellon Bank. You ain't getting in there. You ain't got enough money to post self, right? But I want to take them on. I do. And having said that, I think we're headed for some very difficult economic, if you will. We're in the middle of the Depression, and most people don't want to jiggy with that. They don't want to try to make sense about that. But we got global issues going on. We got the war in Ukraine, and in a few moments after I take this next break, I'm going to come back and talk to you about how Russia and China are now getting ready to take over the world during their impression, and they're going to do it from a biblical perspective. But at any rate, I think you're going to see some other banks fail and run on banks, and you're going to see the economy go topsy-turvy. You're going to see Trump get indicted, and you're going to see all hell break loose everywhere else. You better get covered in the blood of Jesus and protected by his word, because they ain't good looking for what's going on there.